And now back to politics and our political panel. Joining us today is Molly Ball of The Atlantic, Ed O'Keefe of The Washington Post. His colleague, Ruth Marcus, is a columnist and deputy editorial page editor at The Post. And Ramesh Ponnuru is senior editor at The National Review. Ramesh, I want to start with you. Donald Trump has made some staff picks. He's thinking about some others. Do you have a unified theory of what he's doing? Is there a clear message to the picks he's made?
I don't have a unified theory, and I'm not sure he has a unified theory either, but I would say that the transition is going much better than one might have expected a couple of weeks ago when there was all this breathless coverage about what a disaster it was turning out to be. The interesting thing going on in the transition right now is this very public fight going on about who is going to be the Secretary of State in a Trump administration, where you have top Trump advisors like Kellyanne Conway really blasting the idea that Mitt Romney might be that person.
I'm going to hold off on the Secretary of State drama because it is fascinating to watch in public. But Ruth, I just wanted to get on some of the names that have already been made. I was interested that on the one hand, you had Donald Trump in his interview with the New York Times say Kelly Ayotte, former senator from New Hampshire, was never going to get anything because she had said that Donald Trump was not a role model for her children. Then Nikki Haley, the governor of South Carolina, who had been very critical of Donald Trump, is now the ambassador to the UN. So what do you make of those two different decisions?
Sometimes he can be more magnanimous than others. I do have to say to Ramesh, if this transition is going well, I would really like to see one that's going poorly, because let's be clear, and I'm going to just channel Tolstoy here, all transitions are chaotic, but they're each chaotic in their own unique way. This one is crazy. Well, first of all, we're having a transition by Twitter, right? He's communicating with us. Normal presidents-elect have press conferences. This one has a Twitter account with peevish tweets. That he's picking people in the most haphazard way. Usually you submit your national security team and then your domestic policy team. It's just kind of random people. You pick your UN ambassador before you pick your Secretary of State. And finally, this remarkable, I know we're not getting to it yet, this remarkable public dissent we can't stop talking about.
Well, Molly, do you sign up for that? Because Senator Jeff Sessions, that was an obvious pick. Mike Flynn for the National Security Advisor. These are loyalists who are in the Trump camp. That seems like a...
So I do have a grand unified theory, which is that Donald Trump is running the transition exactly the way he ran his campaign, which was exactly the way he's always run his business. He creates competing power centers and pits them against one another. He likes to have underlings squabbling for his favor. It's always very clear that he is the one in charge, and he bestows his favor sort of arbitrarily and capriciously and haphazardly. So everyone is always kept on their toes. Nobody ever knows quite where they stand with him. This is his style personnel-wise and always has been. Now, there is no ideological consistency, right? Someone like a Jeff Sessions, someone like a Steve Bannon, who is not a traditional Republican, paired with someone like a Reince Priebus, who is, someone like a Jeff Sessions, who's been at odds with many other Republicans in the Senate, paired with someone like a Nikki Haley, who is much more of a traditional conservative. And I don't think we should expect there to be any ideological consistency, because Trump himself has very little ideological consistency. He's much more interested in personality, and the way he seems to be making these choices, the vetting process seems to be, come to my tower and I shall evaluate you. And he's making choices on that basis.
Ed, what Molly describes is actually what some people described FDR's management. Sure. Battles and fights, and then see how it goes. So there is a tradition of this. What do you make of it, Ed? And now finally we can talk to the Secretary of State point, which is this public debate going on between whether he's going to pick Rudy Giuliani or Mitt Romney, or maybe Bob Corker, senator from Tennessee, or maybe a player to be named later.
Yeah, I mean, look, everyone who's exasperated by all this needs to get over it. This is the way it's going to be. This is the way he is. And I just think, this is the new normal, in essence, for presidential management. The idea that it has to be done a certain way, I think is foolhardy, because he hasn't done anything the normal way, and he won. And so don't be surprised by any of this, is sort of what I've been telling aggrieved relatives and exasperated colleagues and everyone else. As for Secretary of State, look, my only question is, how can a Republican-controlled Senate confirm someone like Rudy Giuliani, given his business practices over the last few years, when you've spent the last several years prosecuting Hillary Clinton for doing similar things? He's been a consultant to world leaders, some of questionable degree. He's been giving speeches all over the world. He can argue that, that gives him vast experience, which is the same argument in some respects that the Clintons were making, that they had these connections around the world. But I don't see how certain Republican lawmakers can have spent the last few years doing what they did and saying what they said about her, and then turn around and confirm him when he was doing much the same.
But the thing we need to talk about is the remarkable spectacle of his own campaign manager, Kellyanne Conway, publicly differing with him on Twitter and in public interviews about the wisdom of Romney as Secretary of State. If anybody has any precedent for this, I'd like to hear it.
So I'll read you. Kellyanne Conway tweeted, receiving deluge of social media and private comms communications, Ray Romney. Some Trump loyalists warn against Romney as Secretary of State. And so, Ramesh, some people see that as the former campaign manager arguing with her boss through Twitter, not, in the boardroom.
She says that she's given the same advice privately, and it's certainly true that this has not been done before, but I assume that she's doing it knowing that Trump doesn't mind her doing it, that he may even like this kind of drama, and so she figures, why not? I think some of the points she's making are actually reasonable ones. It is perfectly reasonable for an incoming president to want cabinet members who are loyal to him, who will not make a big resignation in principle that hurts the administration. And given their history together, one has to worry about that if you're Donald Trump, about Mitt Romney.
It's also interesting that Kellyanne Conway is positioning herself as speaking for the grassroots, speaking for Donald Trump's supporters, saying this is, and I think there may be a personal side to it for her as well, but it is true that, she is his connection in a way to the millions of people out there in America who are not part of any other political party or movement, but who are loyal to Trump. And if she is indeed sounding a signal that he doesn't want to turn against those people, there would not be another voice in his ear or in his administration that would be speaking for those people, and presumably that's important to him.
Ed, I want to get to this question of Donald Trump's conflicts of interest. He's got businesses all over the world. As you mentioned, a lot of this campaign was about the conflicts between the Clinton Foundation and the Clinton Secretary of State. Where are we on the question of Donald Trump's private interests and Donald Trump's presidency?
Well, he so far embraces the fact that he is a global businessman and has made no publicly apparent moves to really divest himself of it all. It's a complicated thing, but I think what we need to remember is that current federal law would allow him to continue doing this. And I think the question is, will the country want somebody who is potentially a part-time president, who is also a part-time CEO of some degree? And if not, how will the public react? I think, if there's evidence that he or his family is ingratiating themselves of the presidency while other things aren't getting fixed as he promised, then we'll see a reaction. But this is uncharted waters, and we'll have to see.
Ruth, he told the New York Times essentially presidents can't have conflicts of interest.
Well, let me tell you this. They can, and he does. The federal law does not cover this, but there's obviously the emoluments clause of the Constitution, and there is the way presidents have behaved in the past. This is a very dangerous road he's going down. It's totally obvious that somebody with his massive holdings is going to have a problem. He should have planned for this. He was remarkably unprepared for this, and he's been remarkably obtuse since being elected about the need, even if you're not going to divest your holdings, to separate his business life from his presidential life. Instead of separating, he's piling conflict on conflict, inviting his children into both the government and the business.
Ramesh, what do you think other Republicans should other Republicans care about this? Is it going to get in the way of business congressional Republicans want to get done, do you think?
Well, there's no statutory problem that he's got right now. I don't think he's got a political problem in the sense of his supporters in the polls turning against him. But I do think he's creating trouble for himself and his administration and for Republicans down the line, because there's the potential for any number of scandals. There's the potential that otherwise reasonable decisions get second-guessed because people wonder, is there some private interest of the Trump company that is biasing our decisions? I think they'd be better off taking steps to prevent those sorts of conflicts.
Molly, 15 seconds. Any immediate steps they could take?
Well, he could get rid of his business, but he doesn't want to do that. This whole campaign for Donald Trump was about shattering norms, refusing to accept, for example, the tradition of candidates releasing their tax returns. He feels that he got away with it. He feels that he was vindicated. I think he therefore feels that he doesn't have to do the traditional things that presidents have done. We shall see if he gets away with it when this becomes about basically massive state corruption.
All right, we'll end on that. Thanks all of you for the brisk panel. and we'll be right back in a moment.